We do a lot of trials at Sanford, and that is because you have one time of the year to make it.
We want to keep moving the needle, and with that idea, we are implementing trials in the vineyard, whether it's decreasing the yield slightly in a certain section or changing the canopy trellis. Anything to make our job easier is the goal, but also just to continually improve the wines.
If we're just going about doing things the same way year in and year out, we'll never know what the potential is if we don't try something to the right or try something to the left.
These trials just help us improve incrementally year over year. We only have one small window in a vintage to pick or to prune or to adjust our crop levels. Knowing which Cooper works well with Sanford and Benedict compared to La Rinconada, or the Chardonnay at La Rinconada compared to the Chardonnay at Sanford and Benedict. We only learn those through trials.
We are working with 14 different clones of Pinot Noir and 5 different clones of Chardonnay, all on different sites, and understanding their personalities and then what will make them kind of come out of their shells. We've kind of come to this language within our winery that we think of our blocks as introverts and extroverts. And the introverts, they don't really need as much handling, and they would like to be kept to themselves. Extroverts, they want the attention, and they can also stand up to perhaps a little bit more new oak. And so figuring that out year after year is, it's what we're striving for.
One of the most shocking trials that we learned with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay is racking through the brocaroo, traditional racking that's been used since perhaps the beginning of aging wine in barrel. That was very obvious tasting between those different trials and how that affects the wines. And you would be so surprised how much that affects the overall wine. Simple trials that have had the most impact is with Chardonnay in not stirring the lees. Traditionally speaking, the thought carried over from the old world was that Chardonnay should be stirred, and like all good things that California does, there's a time when we did everything to the extreme.
Decreasing batonnage, that was a big evolution for our Sanford style. We are deciding between adding a little bit extra lees when it comes to the aging in barrel and fermentation in barrel, or racking it nice and clean so that it can keep that nice precision on the palate.
Some of the most important trials for Pinot Noir are yields, how many tons per acre we're growing, trying to have balanced vines. It's not always just the lowest yields you can get. It's finding that sweet spot that balances out the vine so that we don't have too much vegetative growth, which can give green characters in the wine, or too little, which gives a lot of overripe, ripe tomato-y characters in the wine by not having enough yield.
For Pinot Noir, we are playing also with a little bit of that lees post-fermentation, and then deciding what percent of new oak do we want to work with, because our older vines, they are a little bit more delicate and they can't always stand up to a higher percentage of oak. So finding that balance.
The trials have helped us with how much whole cluster we can use in Pinot Noir, not having the wine being so dominated by it that that's the only aspect of the site that you get, but not so little that you don't have that little bit of intrigue and that spice and that noble tannin that you can get that helps accentuate the site.
Over the past few years, we've started to implement these trials that have just proven so worthy of our extra time and taking the extra measure to taste every single barrel and deciding whether we need to rack or not to rack.
And sometimes they're little adjustments and other times they're massive and we think, oh gosh, this had such an incredible impact. And sometimes we'll do a trial and we'll say, oh, that just didn't work. That's not good at all. We're not going to do that again.
Something as simple as oak, it affects the wine tremendously. We've been using less and less new oak. Understanding the age of the oak, the treatment, the stave mill that the oak came from, all these boring things really add up.
When I first started, we were working with a little bit of native and working with it more on like a trial basis. But I think now we just have fully explored that and embraced it. What I find with the wines is that they are they're less uniform. So we have all of these subtle nuances in all of the blocks, and during these fermentations, we have a block separated out into multiple tanks, and we want that tank to be as expressive of the site as possible. And if we're adding all of the same yeast to every single tank, maybe perhaps we're kind of making a more uniform style, and we want to diversify and find that the wines are just a lot more expressive.
Understanding how much contact to have with the wine in the fermenter, how much we need to really push it or pull back, how long we should be fermenting. These are all trials that we're constantly fine-tuning and learning from, and that have a real impact on the beauty and the expression of the site and the wines.
Our focus has always been to make the best wines of the place, but we have done a much better job to be even more singularly focused with John Tolato and Trey and myself and our entire team, that quality comes first.
Being lifelong learners and wanting to constantly improve, the trials are the only way, when you have this small window, that you can really affect change in the right direction.